You know, sometimes you think something through and you're like, yeah, this is going to work out mint. And then you take a bunch of time and effort and you implement it. And as soon as it's done, you realize that you fucked up. Welcome back to Post Projects and Project 818 SRX ish. So, it's kind of a science project here today. I'm going to install a transmission cooler. Now, the Subaru 5-speed doesn't come with a transmission cooler like the 6-speed does. The 6-speed, as far as I know, sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but the 6-speed does come with a internal pump and an internal cooler of some sort. I'm not sure there's an external one, but I do have a rather large, well, for a transmission cooler, a decent sized cooler here. I've got just a regular style oil pump, or oil filter, sorry. And then my oil pump, or fuel pump, or whatever you want to call it, is just a cheap Amazon, I don't know, $70 Canadian, $75 Canadian jobby. And then all of my old oil lines, which I'm not worried about them for this setup. They did fail me. You can see where I got the tape on this here temporarily. They did fail me for the oil, but cold rotary is going to be pushing, 110, 120 psi of oil pressure. This setup might push a couple of psi. So I'm not too worried about it. It's also, all of the lines are going to be easily visible if I do develop a leak. It's a lot less concerning than the engine setup. But I did want to test it and make sure that this pump was going to be up to the task to sucking through the oil filter. And this was just an oil filter adapter I got off Summit. And I kind of wanted to make it for, just kind of make use of these old lines for something that wouldn't be too critical. So, that's what I got going on here. It sucks in through this line in my very Canadian Tire pail. I've got all the fluid that was in the transmission. I just drained it out. And it's all only maybe got 100 kilometers on it. So, all good stuff. I'm not worried about it. Old fluid clogging up my filter and my lines. Now, it sucks in through here, goes through the filter, through the pump, and then up through the cooler, and then dumping back down. Now, as it's sitting right now, I'll turn it on here in a second, you'll see that it's surging a little bit, and I didn't run it long enough to know if the little bit of surging is simply due to it needs to run enough and basically get all the air pockets out of the system. It could have something to do with the thickness of the oil. Keep in mind that this is a static test with cold fluid in the car. It's gonna, I have a little inline temperature sensor that's gonna be right basically at the outlet, which is the drain plug. Get into that after, but it's gonna be triggered by a temp sensor. So I mean, we're gonna have 180, 200 degree Fahrenheit fluid going through here, and one of the best benefits is just the extra fluid. So we're going to go from 4 quarts to, I'm guessing, another probably quart in here. Oh, I'm going to say at least 6 quarts by the time you get all the lines and then you fill up the filter and the cooler itself. And then something that is very important if you're installing a transmission cooler is you want to make sure you have enough fluid in there that when the pump is on, your fluid level is at the right height on the dipstick. So that's going to mean that you are going to have a little bit higher than your dipstick level if your pump isn't on. But because the transmission in most transmissions, manuals obviously, it's the oil is just pooled in the bottom, and the gears pick up the oil as they splash through a certain level of oil, and then they flick it everywhere, and that's what covers all the gears. So if that level is low, the gears might not pick up the fluid, and your level will get low when the pump is on, just because even if there was no ear pockets in it, the fluid has to get through the system and then drain down through the transmission back into that puddle, because you're not putting the fluid right back into the puddled oil at the bottom of the transmission. I'm dumping my fluid in, well, on top of fifth gear in the back of the transmission. So it's got to get down over the gears and then pull to the front. So I have no idea yet how much that is, but there's going to be a certain amount that it's going to have to, my oil level when static is going to, with no pump on, is going to be a little high. But that's just the way it is, so that when the pump is on, the transmission lubricates normally. Obviously, I haven't driven the car enough to know that I need a transmission cooler. However, the car, the 818 itself, has been tested enough by guys on tracks that we are getting a lot of 5-speed failures, and we are getting, the guys that have checked temperature are commenting that after a short tracking session, the transmission is extremely hot. So it can definitely benefit from it. If I do upgrade the transmission, this system should be applicable to, say, a 6-speed and do a similar style if warranted. But for the expense, it was just a filter adapter and a pump and some lines I already had. So I think, oh, and the Amazon cooler. It was all fairly cheap, so I think it's cheap insurance to make the 5-speed last as long as I can. You know, sometimes you think something through and you're like, yeah, this is going to work out mint, and then you take a bunch of time and effort and you implement it, and as soon as it's done you realize that you fucked up and it's not going to work. This is one of those times. My thinking all along was that, well, I want to protect the pump, which, I mean, it's a cheap pump. This actually probably shouldn't have been my number one priority, because they're super easy to get. Amazon Prime, get it in a day or two. But the idea was protect the pump, put the filter between the transmission and the pump. Well, it didn't really occur to me how much effort that would be to suck the oil through the filter and a bunch of lines. So when I did my bench test, you know, it was pulsing a bit, but it was transferring. However, it's not now, not very well anyway. So I got my line coming off the bottom of the transmission, basically at the drain plug, and it's going to my filter, which is up underneath the turbo, and then coming all the way back to the pump. So there's a good 5 feet of hose, so similar to what I had in my little test setup, but it's just not flowing very well. And the more I thought about it and looking things up, it just, the pump is going to be straining trying to suck through there. I could leave it as is. It would work easier with the hot fluid, which it will normally be. But the more I think about it, I don't think it's the right setup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install one of these, which is just an inline 250 micron screen. I'm going to put that just before the pump, and I'm going to pump straight from the bottom of the transmission into the pump. And then I think what I'll do is I'll take that oil filter and I'll put it right here. I'll come out of the pump, push it through the oil filter, and then push it through the oil cooler, and then back in the transmission. Means I gotta redo my lines, which is not the end of the world. I've got a bunch of this. This is the lines that I'm reusing from, that used to be my old lines for the engine. I think what I should do is take my lines off again and do another bench test, but put the pump on the other side and push through and see if I get a steady stream, and then do a test without the filter. I mean, I know I have clean oil, so do a test without the filter at all and without the screen, and just see what effect these things have. If pushing it through the oil filter slows it down, that's okay, because I mean, typically like a differential cooler, like a tilted pump, is only going to flow a couple of gallons per minute, and this one flows, I think, 5 or 6. So don't actually sit quite this low with the seat in the car. But I got the transmission pump and cooler and filter and thermostat all installed and working properly now. The filter is in a fairly serviceable spot. I mean, how often do you actually change your transmission fluid? As far as testing, the big thing that I'm curious about, so I've got switches here, and these two are for the transmission pump. This one is going to turn it on manually, and this one will turn it on with the thermostat. So the big thing I'm curious about is how often will it kick in. I believe it's 180 degree Fahrenheit thermostat. So if that cuts in a lot, well, then I know I'm definitely helping the transmission. With this motor and turbo and now my new fuel system, I probably still am going to exceed what a 5-speed can hold. I do have, I guess, the strongest 5-speed short of PPG gears, but we're still nowhere near the strength of the 6-speed. So is a 6-speed in my future? Maybe. But this is something I kind of always wanted to experiment with, and whether or not, you know, it could work with the cheaper pumps, because you look at the Tilton pumps and they're 3, 4, 5 times the cost of this Amazon one. So I'm curious. It's just a little experiment, and I think it's going to work, and I probably wasted way too much time on it. But I do have a lot more stuff done that I just didn't film. You know, I've tested all my fuel system, and it's all good and solid. I have fired up the car with my new injectors. I'm not going to do that right now, but I will turn on the car, or turn on the ignition, so I can show you how loud the pump is. There's the fuel pumps. There's 2 now. So it's pretty loud. I also put a fan on the intercooler, so that should be right there. And then the middle one, like I said, is for the, it's also for the switch, or for the transmission pump. It just has the little thermostat that's mounted right next to the drain plug. So it's the first bit of fluid. So that should heat up with the fluid. It might be slightly delayed to the highest temp in the fluid, but at 180 Fahrenheit, it's still cutting in plenty early for it to start cycling. What I would probably do on track is maybe even like once I get the tranny up to temperature a little bit, like just a few laps, I'd probably flick it on manually, because otherwise we're gonna, I don't know that we would shock it, or if we would even notice a difference, but I don't know if I would want cold fluid to just get dumped in there, you know what I mean? Or maybe that'd be fine, I'm not sure. We'll see. I might still snap a transmission, or snap some gears. I'll probably snap some axles, but let's put some power to the ground first. So, as always, thanks for watching. Always appreciate feedback, like, subscribe, and I promise the next videos there'll be a little driving. I am going to take it for a rip without the body, and then just to make sure everything is, all my new lines, everything's good. I want to, just on my street here, I just want to get a little bit of load on it and make sure that everything's going to hold up before I cover up with the body, which will be going on wrapped, which I'm really excited about, and I can't wait to show you guys what color I went with. Alright, until next time, peace.